What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Lead222 podcast. My name is Dave Hootke, and I'm coming to you from Indianapolis, Indiana, actually at Cohatch Working Space. So shout out to Cohatch today. And to all you listening, this podcast is focused on helping student ministry leaders like you stay healthy and become more effective in life and ministry. I want to welcome in Bo Shears, our president of Lead222. Bo, what's up?
What's up? Yeah, I'm coming from my kitchen here in cold Chicago.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So there you go. There you go.
Little snowy up there. Well, we're today very excited about this conversation, and it's titled Starting Over. And we're going to be talking about, for a lot of you, maybe transitioning, or maybe you've started over at a new church. There's a lot of learnings that take place, and some things that maybe we didn't get right, some things that we did, and maybe some of you are just beginning in ministry, and you're starting at a new church, and you're starting, to learn a lot of things. And so I'm really excited about this topic today of starting over, and looking forward to our guest, Joel Firebaugh, with us. And I first met Joel about probably 3 years ago, maybe getting close to that, at a conference, and love his passion for reaching students, and love seeing the impact that he is having. And so Joel Firebaugh serves as the lead student pastor at Crossroads Church in Cincinnati, Ohio. Crossroads is one church in 11 different locations with over 20,000 in attendance. Joel brings a wealth of knowledge and insight to student pastors everywhere. Gets excited about spending time with his wife, Anna, connecting students to Jesus and doing poorly executed magic tricks like that.
They're okay.
There you go.
They're mediocre.
Joel's passion is helping the next generation take next steps in their faith journey with Jesus. Joel, welcome to the Lead222 podcast. Great having you.
Dave, Bo, I am thrilled to be here. I couldn't be more excited.
Yes, love it. Love it. Well, okay, Joel. So as I started thinking about this topic, and really, you came to mind of thinking about your transition to Crossroads. And so reached out, so pumped that you said yes right away and jumping on here. So we're going to get right to it. So talking about your transition, what has been some things that have surprised you in starting over in a new ministry, within a new church context and culture? So yeah, just share a little bit about that transition. What surprised you from learnings that you had?
Yeah. So for some context, I was at my last church in Michigan. It was called 242 Community Church, and I was there 7 years. And that may not seem like much, but when I left, the church was 15 years old. So I was there almost half the life of the church. So when I left, there was at that church 250 staff members, and only 7 had been there longer than me. And so you can imagine the just amount of trust and rapport as I had seen that church really grow into. When I came, there was only 2 campuses. When I left, there were 7, into everyone around us. I was just kind of at the right place at the right time, had amazing mentors around me. But one thing that surprised me was that trust doesn't translate over immediately into your new place. Your years of trust at your last church, they don't just immediately transfer over. You have to put in the work and re-earn that in a whole new setting, and in my context, an even larger setting. So there's much more.
I bet.
There's much more, and I'm trying not to get too specific on my context. But
That's right, Joel.
I would say, as I'm thinking of just like what would surprise someone, I remember talking with my good friend Ann Wilson. She's over at Traders in Indy, and she didn't start over at a new church, but it was a new role, right? It was a new role. And I remember her saying, like, she was in 4 years into it and it was thriving, and she was like, you couldn't pay me to do it again, like enough, it is that much. So I would say one thing that didn't surprise me and shouldn't surprise you if you're coming into it is just the amount of work that is going to go into starting over. Now, it's worth it. I'm only a year and a half in, and I would already say I'm seeing dividends. But I would say that's one thing. If that's happening for you, you're starting in ministry, and I don't mean work like you got to work 80-hour weeks. I don't mean work, but just the amount of intentionality, I guess you define it, that you're going to have to step in to build trust, build teams, meet people, have rapport, and also make sure you're doing your job. So,
Joel, one of the things that's pretty cool when God gives leadings and opportunities to make change. Normally there's a lot of excitement about that. Hey, we're going to a new
Yeah.
I'm sure you had that, but as we talk to youth pastors around the country, and we try to help them and lead to make that move, even though there's a lot of excitement, I know sometimes there can be some unrealistic expectations,
Yes.
And so why don't you speak, and, what advice would you give to men and women who are thinking about making this move, about having realistic expectations,
That's phenomenal.
maybe a length of time, even, that's going to obviously build momentum, and then an effective, healthy ministry. But what would you say to that?
Yeah, I'll relay some advice given to me, but I'll define it very differently. Someone had said to me, hey, your first 6 months, just be a student. Okay.
Yeah.
Student of culture of the church, a student of your team and your mentors and the pastors over you. And how I had that defined was close to accurate, but I want to redefine it. The way I had it defined was be a sponge. It's the way I had it defined, like just absorb everything in, listen. How I would redefine it is students study. That's what they do. Like, you're a student, you study. And so I would say, go in, study. You should not step into a new environment where it surprises you. So for me, there was about a month and a half in between the church knowing I'd accepted this job and starting it. And then there was about 3 or 4 months before that of me checking out, is this somewhere where I want to go? And when I finished my responsibilities at my church, I would spend the afternoon, the evenings, my wife too, studying. We knew, before I had interviews with people, we knew their role, we knew their spouse's name, we knew their family. If we could figure it out, we knew what neighborhood they lived in, and we was just a ton of context stuff that you can study, because the amount of horror stories we hear of people starting into a new role and it never not being anything like, And so if I had any advice of just being a student, is one, it doesn't start when you start day one. It should start far before that. And two, so for me, it meant multiple trips on my own dime to Cincinnati to meet with people after church services. And I mean, this is a big shift and a big change. And I was not leaving out of spite. I loved my church in Michigan, still have amazing love for 242. That's such a great church. And so it was not leaving out of spite. So if this decision, not only on the prayer end and the just discernment side, are we stepping into it, we wanted to be students even before we stepped into the first day of school. And so the best analogy I could say is it's like deciding at college, right? Hopefully you've done a little research before, you've done some visits, you've met with professors, you've met with, the council in the office, you've been on their website. Like, hopefully all that's happened far before you've chosen to go to school, and definitely far before your first day.
Now, Joel, before one more thought on that, for maybe guys who can't, make the visits like you had. Give us a little bit of practical, like they go to Zoom. Would you even practically, hey, did you call? Did you have connections with, let's say they had a staff or a volunteer team, whatever the size would be? Talk to that a little bit.
Yep, that's wonderful. Yeah, I had to use any kind of connection that I had. I had, people that CCU is Cincinnati Christian University was here in Cincinnati that is no longer in existence. But there was small people that I saw on staff graduated there, and then I would call friends I knew that went to CCU and say, hey, do you know this staff member? And I would get their side of it. And one of my ex coworkers at 242, her brother was one of the teaching pastors at Crossroads, and I said, can I get a meeting with him? And she said, probably not. And I said, okay, can I have your opinion? Can I get a meeting with you? Like type thing. And so yeah, you definitely don't need to. I mean, I would figure out a way to get there one time, at least, have the church bring you out, because you're interviewing them as much as they are you. But if it's a far distance and you can't multiple times, and that's totally realistic, but I would still figure out ways, to do that. And what you'll learn is most people that work for churches, they're pretty great people. Like they wanted, 95% of the time, whenever I found someone who said, can I talk to whatever, it was not I don't have time. There's no time for that. Like, it was I would be honored. Like, let's chat. And I think even brought in some more rapport for me, that they knew, oh, this guy wants to know what he's getting into. So just ask. Get a website, find staff contacts, text. With Instagram, you can DM now. I'm actually a little embarrassed about this one. So our lead pastor, his name's Brian Tome, and I had DM'd him on Instagram. What I didn't know is he has so many whatever coming in that he runs his Instagram, but he has somebody that helps kind of filter all that stuff out. And so they had filtered out my message and responded to me and even said, hey, this is Jen. I help, with BT stuff. I passed on the word and blah, 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 blah. But what was funny then is like, then, cause I kind of like fangirled a little bit in it. Then when we met in person, me and Jen, had to be like, I'm really sorry. Like but I don't know. I just, whatever it was to get you can get access to your church in many ways and the people around it if it's out there with today's technology.
No, that's really good. And I just love, that mindset of being a sponge and being a student and taking that in and learning. And I think that's a big part of, when you start over, when you're starting in a new place, you're really trying to figure out the relationships and growing the relationships and all of that. But there comes a point too, Joel, you've been there a year and a half, when you have to really then assess the ministry, right?
Yes.
Because if we want to go from here to there, we have to understand where are we really? Yeah. And then to be able to assess it, to know where we do need to go. So give us of an idea of like your process to assess, the ministry. What are some of those things that you did to get a realistic, like, okay, this is where we really are. What were some of those things?
Yeah. So now we're talking about the fun stuff. Now we're at the job, right? So we've studied and we've been students. And so I was seeing if I had this right here with me. I might not. Oh, this might be it. Oh, nope. But if not, I can explain it to you either way. So I'd called people that were starting over. So I had gotten off the phone with a friend, Justin Knowles is his name. He's in California, and he had just started over at a church called Sandals. And he was about a year and a half ahead of me. And so I called and, whatever. And he gave me, so I can't even take credit for this, but he gave me his list of questions that he went, and I would be more than happy to forward these to you, but I just can't take credit for them. That he sat down one-on-one and asked every single staff member that he was able to, definitely in the student world, definitely if you're in a multi-site world, the different staff. And they were the same questions and they were set up in the same way. So everything from 1 to 10, what would you, rate your leaders to? What would you rate your culture to? What would you rate your health of just like Christ-centeredness? Like just all these questions. And then what he said is, you can't send this out. This is one-on-one with a cup of coffee, because you're writing down in between every single thing they say. So that was a huge help. And it didn't even take that much time to very early on have at least a sense of how I felt was an accurate assessment that the team would say, within it, that they might not have said before I was on staff.
Were you asking students some of the questions as well, or were those mainly leaders, or were their parents involved?
Great question. This one was 100% staff. Gotcha. I would say it could have been high-level volunteers, so 18 student staff. So like that for them, it was those specific staff members across 11 sites for Crossroads, 7 of them have student ministry. So that's what that one was. But I would say if you're at a context that's just one location, then it should absolutely be, you just start down, high-level volunteers, high-capacity volunteers to leaders, and students should absolutely, if there's a student leadership program, they should be answering those, but you should put them in different categories as you kind of assess that.
Yeah. That, again, Joel, I'd expect that from you, but wise advice, you're talking about how important that is, as a mentor, to reach out to those who've already experienced a little bit more. Good job. You'd mentioned earlier, right at the very beginning, how important it is to build trust. Obviously you're going in, you're fired up. Like I said, you're excited. Obviously you're going in for a purpose, and that's to be more effective in ways that you can bring your leadership. And so you're ready to make some changes, right? You're ready to get in there and start the work. Okay. Give some advice to guys who are all fired up. They're ready to go in there. Yeah. Want to build trust. What really practically, Joel, where do you take a breath and say, okay, you said we got to study, but what did you learn in the sense of building that trust at layers within your ministry? Yeah,
that's great. One, clarity with the people hiring you is so crucial. To say, like you just said, like it is going to take six months. That was my exact language. It's going to take 6 months minimum for me to build trust with this team. And so I upfront wanted to make sure, hey, if in 4 months you guys are like, hey, Joel, you haven't grown it or recruited new leaders, or we haven't seen baptisms, or we haven't seen whatever, fill in the blank, before you even start to say, Yeah, Vince Parker at Life Church, he's wiser than me. He was one I talked to before too, and he said that he told Craig Rochelle 3 years. So like,
Yeah,
I believe is what it was.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think I went in after the assessment knowing that there was a little bit with the place we were at. It's again a specific context. I thought 6 months with a realistic, like, hey, we could at least get our team to trust each other. So there's a book out there, Stephen Covey, called The Speed of Trust. You've probably all read it, and it's just your team is going to move at the speed that they trust each other. So if your leadership or whoever's hiring you can't understand that the investment in building a trustworthy team is actually going to help down the road, long term, the speed go faster, then you might be setting yourself up to fail in that environment. But you would have to be clear when you talk with them. So,
okay, Joe, hold on. Listen, let's say a
Yeah.
young guy's going in. Maybe
Okay.
he's not as maybe he's got some fears, not as confident. You know, I mean, he's excited to go. He's got to go
Yeah.
to direct report. Let's say his direct reports to the pastor at this church. Tell me again, practically, you're saying
Right.
he needs to make sure that his direct report, let's say head pastor at this point, understands what? Like it's going to be a 6-month play. Explain that.
Yeah, that's great. One of the best things you could do would be to show them you have studied, you
That's right.
do know accurately probably where you believe your assessment is that they're at, and then upfront explain to them, hey, this is why it's going to take a blank amount of time for either the team or one of my reasons here was our ministry was heavily middle school. And so I still, our numbers are heavily middle school based because I've explained it's going to take 4 years to build up into a healthy high school thriving ministry. And so I would say clarity is huge just on that. So assessing it, showing them that you understand the assessment, and then explaining up front, even just some time frame. So you don't have to do this. Here's one thing I did, just because I'm extra, I guess. I don't know. I put together, because people are visual, something that they could just see, and I called it like the game plan. Now, Crossroads Youth, that wasn't even their name at the time. It's actually not we're Crossroads students. At the time, it was called student ministry, and it was like HSM and stuff for that. But I literally came up with pictures, because people like pictures. Here's what 6 months will look like.
That's great, Joel. Good job.
Here's what 1 year. Here's what 2 years.
Yeah.
3 years, 3 to 5, all the way to 10, and just explained kind of. Did they read this whole thing? No, it took me way too long for the minimal amount of time they read. But at some point, if I was ever pulled into an office, or you were ever pulled, whoever this is for, and said, hey, why aren't you blank? And you could pull out something and say, we went over this, and I'm right where we talked about. It would go a long way for you to do that prep work up front.
No, that's so good. Some of us, we just might need to rewind that, play that again, listen to that. That's great stuff right there, Joel. So thank you for sharing that. And it does take intentionality to do that. Okay. It takes some time, and then you're doing that too with your trustworthy team that you've been developing and building with, and they're a part of that. So that's really important.
Well, let's talk about real quick, because I got a lot wrong too. I need to, if we have another hour, I can hit all those things too. But if you're in a new church building that team, I don't know if you need to hear this, and I won't go into detail on it, but you will have people that will leave, and like whether that's volunteers or staff, and there will be people probably that you have to ask to step down from a volunteer or staff. And so that all of that mixed together, building trust just does take time. It takes time. So that was all I wanted to say.
No, I think that's important. I think that's important for all of us to hear, because that will happen. And that doesn't mean that we have to be discouraged. It means that it's most likely going to happen. And you know what, those people, they've served a season, and they're going to go serve in a different season and someplace else. But so I think
love them like crazy on their way out, but just don't wear that weight around of
make a decision.
Yeah. That's right.
Yep. That's good. Okay, Joel, this is something that, I think all of us, when we come into a new place, we really want to prove ourselves. I think we want to establish credibility, and sometimes we can kind of come in and we might not notice this. Somebody might actually tell us this, but we might be saying like, well, at my last ministry, we did this. And we might be saying that a lot more than maybe we kind of understand or comprehend. And some of that is good. There's great things that we've learned along the way, but sometimes I think we maybe force it into our new culture and context. But how do we also rest in our calling and in our identity, knowing that God's led us here for a reason? But how do we balance that, of trying to prove ourselves? Here's what we did at our last church, but also knowing God's called me into this it might look different.
Yeah. Great question, by the way. One, I mentioned up front, failures. That was one, even at this church, I think I did highly fail at. I loved where I was coming from. I loved what I'd seen God do over the last 7 years. And I think those words came out of my mouth a lot. And if I could reverse time, at my last church we did, that would be one that I would erase. Like you said, like we have felt called to this. We have felt discernment to be here. I don't know if it was retrofitting what I said earlier, that like, you just don't have that trust of the church coming in. But I think I said that far too much. And I think it actually cost me credibility instead of earned it. So that being said, one of the best ways to earn credibility, I've heard the analogy of adoption before. There's probably people listening, many wonderful people that have adopted beautiful sons or daughters. And there's that analogy of like, when you're adopting a child into your family, like your core values are staying the same. But that is a new person coming in that will eventually begin to change even the way the family views life and sees life and, it doesn't interact. And so I don't remember who shared that analogy with me, but they were basically saying when you step in, it is that church's values and it is that you are stepping into their values that absolutely over time, your uniqueness and gifting will begin to change, that place and culture. But you have to understand in that order, like you're taking on the new family name. For me, it was Crossroads, and kind of stepping into that. So their mission statement became my mission statement, not my old church's mission statement. Their game plan became my game plan. And in the last year and a half, I then think some of when I eventually got to have a voice in some things, I was able to speak with credibility and authority in it.
Yeah. Joel, there's so much to this, and appreciate your advice, up to this point. And there's a lot there. And one of the things that we hold very strong at Lead, I know you do too, as far as, personal health. And also we call it homefield, taking care of your home, whether you're single, married, you have children, but we talk about, you don't want to lose home field advantage, you got advantage there. In this move, you're excited, you're fired up, you're ready to go. Talk to us. And I know that you're married and your wife has been involved in ministry, and she's a mentor, as you shared with us just before. She loves investing in people.
Yeah.
But hey, can you just give some advice to those who are thinking about, because, transition's hard, and there's positive, negative things that's going to happen, but man, you got to be careful for your family, right? Again, wherever you are in your family. Talk to us about, even practically, how did you come together with your wife, where you guys were in agreement, but kind of how you protected home field. What did you do?
That's phenomenal. I love that language too, home field. So I'll get practically, we'll start 10,000 feet in the air. In case you're listening, have never heard this. Thankfully, I had great mentors in my life that said, yes, God comes first, then family, then ministry. Ministry is third, to your family. So you don't want to sacrifice your own relationship with God, because ultimately that will make you a better spouse. That'll make you a better parent, but ministry. I've heard Andy Stanley give a talk called Cheat the Church, where he talks about, hey, if you got 1 million hours a day and something's got to get cheated, let it be, basically, he was saying this as a pastor, let it be the church, not your family. All right. So neat to have, spiritual mentor. I never met Andy Stanley, but still a spiritual mentor, and these people around the country, telling that truth. So practically, that's a big one, because it doesn't mean that it's not going to be tense, or hard. So a good example is my wife was still working. There was a month where I was in Cincinnati and she was in Michigan, and I couldn't have just cheated the church and been like, hey, I'm just going to work remote my first month. It wasn't part of the option. And so I would say very clear expectations with your spouse is a big one. There's a reason when people do these, they go plant a church or start a campus, maybe somewhere, usually they go through these assessments and their spouse is mandatory that they join, because if they're not on board, you've already set up maybe an unhealthy culture where this church is the thing, this ministry is the thing that's moved them. And it's the very thing that took them away from what they loved. And so if they're not on board, I don't want to speak for you, but I would highly advise to not start over in a new ministry if your spouse is that heavily against it. I'm sure there's exceptions out there, and I'm sure you would be talking with your own mentors, but in general, that would be my rule of thumb. Because for me, at least being on board, for us, her family's in Lexington, Kentucky. This is 4 hours closer to her family. And so for us, this was very much her discernment and leading as much as it was mine. And so to have her on board when we talked about those discussions of like, hey, this first month means us being apart, we were able to put a plan in place to maybe make sure home field advantage was taken care of.
Yeah. One other question before we finish up here, and Dave will close us out, is, Joel, I want to dial 1 degree change here. And I just want you to briefly talk through, sometimes when guys are excited or girls are excited to get a new position, give some insight to, a lot of times there's a fear to let the pastor know at that church that they're been looking and all of a sudden have an opportunity to move. And sometimes there's a fear of, like, if I say something and if I tell them I'm interested, I'd be let go, or they'll think I'm not a part of it. Now, your transition was beautiful. You said that, and I'm fortunate I had the similar experience where it was just a win-win kind of deal. But what advice would you say for people to relax and say, and what is the proper way to address that?
That is a hard question and a great one. And the reason it's a hard question is you're all at very different ministries and churches, right? And unfortunately, even within the Bride of Christ, I have seen people respond in healthy and unhealthy ways when this subject of really loyalty is where a lot of the heart's about, is brought up. So I would do your research. It's very hard. If we were talking about my own context, I could have told my direct report anything and let him know and processed, and it'd been a safe place. And but I just know, unfortunately, that's why I don't want to give a catch-all answer, that I've had people who've went through the exact same steps I did and had very different, results as well. So I don't know, Bo and Dave, you guys got advice on that?
I think a lot of people do a lot of these decisions in isolation, and, don't do it in isolation. Make sure that you not only are praying about this, it's not out of emotion. If you're married, you're talking with your spouse, that it's not just a knee-jerk reaction. You're really praying through this and seeking guidance and clarity and wisdom. And really praying too, specifically, Lord, when is that right timing to be able to share this? So I think those are important. Don't do it.
Dave, one of the things I know that, again, Joel was wise in saying that it doesn't all fit into one box, but there's different. It's complicated. It can be complicated, but I'd say that the main thing is keep your integrity. And
that's great.
What I mean by that is just,
that's great.
Follow your heart and keep your integrity, because, fear is not our friend in this thing.
Yeah. That's great.
To identify that and know as best you can, just be a man or woman of integrity, speak the truth. And again, that can be difficult at times, but you won't go wrong there. Take the high road.
That's great.
But hey, Joel, bro, I could talk to you so much more, man. Good job. I'm gonna give it back to Dave, but I know he's going to thank you. But thanks for, helping some guys and girls around the country with your experience. And, I would like for you to give words of encouragement, just finishing this thing out. What would you say? Just, to people out there who love what they do, they're in this, they got a passion for this generation.
That's right.
What do you say?
I mean, I got a couple things. One, I would say, don't grow weary in doing good. All right. I've moved. Yes, I started over one time, and I hope to die at this church. Okay. And so don't think the answer is always starting over. There is beauty in not growing weary and doing good and staying and putting down deep, deep roots. And I hope that to truly be the case here. If you are starting over because you truly feel like this is exactly where God is moving you and you've discerned that and you've studied, then I'll say, if it's where God has you, it's worth it. It's worth the work, and obedience is God's love language in many ways. And so to everyone out here that's specifically working with the next generation too, they're worth it, and we have heard this generation called the fighting generation and the empathetic generation. And if we can get them fighting for the gospel of Jesus, then this world is not going to know what's coming after them. So don't grow weary in doing good, whether it's staying or going. If you're obedient, it's going to be worth it. And we're going to see the next generation change the world through it.
Love it. Joel, where can people find you?
You can email me, which is first dot last name, joel.firebaugh, spelled like my little name right there, at crossroads.net. You can find me on Instagram, which is Joel_Firebaugh. And those are probably the best two ways to get hold of me. And I love to talk youth ministry.
That's
love
awesome.
to talk it. So
yeah,
anytime.
We don't have to give your address. That's good.
We can.
But we can't find you on social media. So that's good. Joel, man, thanks for joining us today. So appreciate you. Thanks.
Oh, I love it. I love what y'all are doing. I'm excited to see amazing, amazing men and women fighting for this next generation in all different sizes and different areas of the country. And it's just exciting. So thanks for the work you guys do.
That's awesome. Well, I want to thank you for listening today. We're so grateful for you. Hey, real quick, as we talked about starting over, Bo and I wrote a coaching program called Lead Start, Your First 100 Days. And you guys, we are coaching men and women in this, and it's just going incredibly well. And we talk about subjects that we just talked about in this podcast: assessing the ministry, time management, how to lead healthy teams, leading up, how to implement a strategic plan. These are things that we're going to help come alongside you, that you don't have to do this alone. And some great qualified, certified coaches and trainers who've done this before, who can come alongside you and help you lead a healthy life and a healthy ministry, and to see what we all want to see. And that's more students come to know Jesus and to live on purpose and on mission for him. And so if you don't have a coach or mentor, go to lead222.com. We'd love to connect with you and come alongside you as well. You can rate, review this podcast. The more you do that, the more that we can get this in front of other youth pastors to help encourage them, because this is what we need. We need encouragement. We're not alone. Also, subscribe. You can do that right now to this new YouTube channel. Joel, you get to start off with our YouTube channel with this podcast.
Let's go. Subscribe right there.
Right somewhere in there.
So. You'll find it. It's big and red.
All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.